The north side of Bridal Veil Lake, Ontario, is known for two things: fancy inns and gouging tourists. I'd done deliveries to the area before on New Year's Eve. Rich people pay a lot for manufactured snow and ice sculptures. They throw big parties in the theaters, drink too much, fight, throw up, pass out, and flirt inappropriately. Just like poor people. People like me, snow delivery drivers and sculptors, are the little pores the rich employ to attempt to warm their cold hearts. Nobody seems satisfied at these parties. That's why they drink so much, I guess. There's rarely dancing. Orchestras forced into the pit below the stage play so quietly that the songs are impossible to identify. No one sings. It's rare to see a genuine smile. When I arrived at the George Moore, a theater and a small hotel, the dread of an awful night deepened. The parking lot had no fancy cars. Only delivery vans, a pickup truck, and a sedan with not one spare tire utilized, but 3. These were the vehicles of my cast. The party should have started. I was to perform a carving show with hand tools only. Chainsaws and tuxes sounds like a wicked name for a band, but the noise would drown out the quiet music they're trying to ignore. Even weirder, no lights decorated the main entrance. No valets waited. No security for show. I parked my truck in the loading dock, where the orange glow of a motion sensor light draped crevices and corners in a sinister mystery. Enough to hide a skinny, old guy in a lab coat and round sunglasses. I only saw him because he held a cigarette between the rubber fingers of a latex glove. He sipped more than he smoked, sending narrow plumes from the side of his mouth rhythmically. Normally, I unload before donning my tool belt. Not tonight. I got out of the truck on the passenger side, so I wouldn't lose sight of the odd stranger. I also made sure my chisel hadn't fallen out, and held the handle as I approached him. I'd read stories on the internet about rich people holding eyes-wide-shut parties and torturing ordinary people for their amusement. Having served so many wealthy stiffs, I could believe it. It took a lot of stimulus for their type to express any joy. The chisel could slash through solid ice like butter. A wrinkly chicken neck would be easy trimming. I wasn't going out like this. If this was what I worried it could be. Could be? As I wrestled with the vocabulary of my own interior monologue, I caught a whiff of the man's body odor beneath his nicotine cologne. My eyes teared up. I couldn't help wincing, and covering my nose with the back of my hand. "Snow and ice," he croaked. If he took offense, he didn't say. With gnarled fingers, he artfully flicked the remnant of his cigarette off the loading dock, and under my truck. He felt for the handle to the service entrance behind him. No point in turning to look. The man was blind. Out came his white cane. Confidently, he negotiated the sterile hallway to the swinging door of a huge kitchen. He pointed at the freezer door. "Unload in there," he said, "and wait here till I call." Where's the party?" His aged features, those sunglasses, gave away nothing. "There are 4 others in the adjacent dining room. That is all." He barely made a sound as he exited through the double doors, leading, presumably, to his very tiny and sad New Year's Eve party. A hum from the freezer, the dull lighting, the quiet were suitable for a funeral, which is what this evening certainly would turn out to be. Tips would be negligible. Soul-sucking misery guaranteed. They didn't even have music. I could only imagine what kind of food they'd selected. I still hadn't seen another peasant like myself. Who would serve them supper? Not me, that was for damn sure. I called up the boss to explain the situation. He could barely hear me through his own raucous party, and sounded like he'd already had a few strong pops. "No, Mike," I said. "I'm telling you, there's nobody here. No party. It's a smelly old guy and his 4 friends." "You at the Shaw? Place is huge." "No, George Moore Theater. Also huge. Empty with only 5 guests and me. Mike, this is weird. I want to go." Aw, man, he slurred. Don't go, it's a party. I sighed. The connection dropped. I think Mike hung up. The dilemma presented itself instantly. Drunk Mike wouldn't care if I split. He'd forget about the busted contract and the loss of revenue. Hungover Mike on New Year's Day would not be so understanding. The odorous old guy returned. It's time. I haven't unloaded. He hissed. Well, what have you been doing back here? Hurry! Every moment lost is a tragedy. I attributed his cryptic remark to general old-person craziness. He didn't have much time on this planet or something. So every second spent dicking around seemed like a lost opportunity. Unloading the truck, putting the snow and ice in the freezer, took about 20 minutes. The blind guy came back to the kitchen with a similarly dressed, for science, colleague. She didn't smell bad. Or good. She didn't smell. And that seemed intentional. I'm Karen, she said, curtsying whilst pinching the tips of her lab coat. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Kyle. I'm not sure why I lied. Seemed prudent, I guess. Kyle, she said, tasting the name, finding the syllables less than palatable. She frowned and narrowed her eyes, displeased. Thank you, Kyle. In 5 minutes, after we return to the dining room, you will enter with enough snow to build a homunculus. Humongous? A snowman, you... Karen squeezed the old man's forearm to prevent the insult. You want... I said. A snowman? Nobody had ever asked for a regular-ass snowman before. Animals, graceful and predatory, were the preferred choices of the rich. A simple snowman would be a nice change. Sure, no problem. Just the one? Karen seemed confused. You will make many tonight. Your boss promised service until morning. I don't understand. Usually, I made the sculpture for an audience or prior to a party. Then I bowed and left before the Richie Riches got gropey. My ass had been patted and pinched by the wealthiest people in town. You will be paid, the old man sniped, holding up 3 gnarly fingers. 3 times as much. It has been agreed upon. Mike agreed. Probably not even drunk Mike. The amount was considerable. Who couldn't use a financial bonus around the holidays? Just snowmen? That's it, Karen said, gentle again. Her constant shift in tone gave me the creeps. You make a snowman, you come back to the freezer, and wait for us to call for the next. That is all that is required, the old man shouted. I finally raised a finger. If he shouts at me again, I'm out. You don't understand the... Once again, Karen stopped her pungent colleague. It won't be a problem, right? Oatmeal? Oatmeal? I questioned, softly, almost to myself. They ignored me. The old guy grinned. I never get tired of hearing you call me that. What? Oatmeal? Really? She seemed to be flirting with him. This oatmeal. Takes me back to our childhood, he said. And where we started. Karen smiled and hooked his arm. Imagine if we had called him Oatmeal. Oatmeal chuckled. I don't know if this would be easier or harder if we had. They were already moving towards the door, so I couldn't see their faces. Their levity had already evaporated. I could tell by the identical slump of their shoulders and the hesitation in their steps. Come along, Kyle, Karen said. Bring the snow for the man. I waited till the double doors had stopped swinging before I considered dipping the scene again. Fucking Mike. Fucking jerk sober Mike and fun drunk Mike. Fucking rich old people and their money that I wanted. Fuck. I brought the first cylindrical snow tube, the smallest I had, from the freezer. About 100 pounds of packed snow inside the nylon webbing could make 2 or 3 snowmen, and they only needed 1. But the odds were still high I'd be running from whatever awaited in the dining room. The unrecognizable dining room of the George Moore Theater. Huge sheets of plastic lined the floor and parts of the lower walls. Medical or scientific equipment, lots of green and red pinpoint lights were similarly wrapped. Instead of the somewhat familiar and gigantic wooden table next to the majestic hearth, a hospital bed with several dangling restraints took center stage. I knew before they said it. They wanted their snowman horizontal, on the bed, and restrained. Oatmeal scowled, as if he could read the what the fuck expression I'd decided not to hide. Karen took no notice. Another 3 old folks, dressed for research, prepared tools, saws, knives on shiny metal rolling carts. 5 stools surrounded the bed. I had to move them to get started. Making a snowman out of hard, already packed snow is a little different than traditional methods. I had to flatten, loosen, and fluff the materials with my own tools. A rake, a shovel, and my own hands. I made the balls fast and then placed them on the bed. "Restrain it," Oatmeal barked. I don't know how he knew I'd finished. Could he hear snow? "Okay," I said, fastening 3 leather loops, 1 for each segment of snowman. "Now go!" I looked at Karen. "We talked about this, Karen. If you want..." Swiftly, she guided her friend back to his stool, whispering something in his ear to make him smile, revealing disgusting, greeny black teeth. "So sorry, Kyle. It won't happen again. Please return to the kitchen to prepare for the next one. There are alcoholic beverages in the fridge. Please help yourself." I dragged the flaccid snow tube behind me, on my way to a much-required beer. Normally, I never drink at work, but I found building and restraining a snowman unnerving. I felt dirty, like I'd somehow violated a sacred childhood ritual, something meant to be innocent and pure. I kept touching the handle of my chisel, the one tool I wouldn't need tonight, unless things got really scary. "Happy birthday!" A voice boomed through the theater. I dropped my beer. The bottle landed perfectly on its bottom. Not a drop spilled. Stranger still, the glass seemed to gently vibrate, as if a baby earthquake started below. I could feel it in my feet, but in the air, too. Something indescribable. The elation, the peace and wonder of the moment vanished swiftly. I flinched as Karen pounded through the swing doors. "Another, Kyle, please." She smiled and wiped a swath of frizzy orange hair from her sweaty forehead. Upon entering the dining room again, the first obvious oddity was the absence of the snowman. A ton of rolled-up towels at the base of the hospital bed appeared wet. "Did you melt the snowman?" I asked. "No questions!" Oatmeal snapped. "Karen," I said. "Oatmeal," she cautioned him, and he went back to muttering into a recorder. I didn't catch a word of it. I got to work. That's when I saw the hat on yet another steel medical tray. A top hat. Black. And it looked soft like silk. A fake flower had been pinned to the ribbon. Why did it seem so familiar? Below the hat, on the second tray, were other curious items. A button, 2 black rocks, and a pipe. Not a crack pipe, but like a regular one. A straw broom leaning against the bed itself also caught my attention. "What is this stuff?" I asked. Karen answered fast to stop another outburst from Oatmeal, no doubt. "It's hard to explain, and we don't have time anyway. But we are scientists, studying phenomena from our childhood. All of us were school children together, a long, long time ago. We're on the verge of an important breakthrough for humanity, and, strange as it may seem, we could only conduct our work near Christmas, and never after New Year's Eve." She scrawled on a chunky clipboard as she spoke. "We used to build snowmen ourselves, but time, it seems, has finally caught up to us. Thus, your services are valued, Kyle. Please, commence with the next snowman. Okay, I said again. The second snowman was completed and bound faster than the first. 1171, Oatmeal announced. Prematurely, I guess, because Karen quietly shushed him. Kyle, she said, too sweetly. You must go. Please enjoy the alcoholic beverages, I interrupted, already heading for the kitchen, intending to find something harder. Vodka is best stored in the freezer. The George Moore had some top-shelf stuff stored in a cardboard box in the corner. I had almost dropped a storage container full of solid ice on it before. I poured and drank 2 shots, straight before... Happy birthday! What the hell was happening in there? Ah! Shrieked the previously jubilant and thunderous voice. Stop! Please! You have to... No! The anguish became a watery gurgle, and I shivered in the freezer, hardly believing anything at all. But then the kitchen doors were banging, and Karen was back. Another, please, she said, and she tried to fake a genuine smile by squinting her eyes. I heard screaming, I said. Oh, she said, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before rebooting. Sorry? That's, okay? As I dragged yet more snow to the dining room, I asked her finally, why were there screams? What were you doing? She stopped our return by pinching my tricep between her surprisingly strong index finger and thumb. Kyle, as I said, it's difficult to explain. And there's no time? I chirped cryptically. Karen frowned. Correct. And if I refuse to build you another snowman? The question lacked the sting I thought it would have. It seemed like something a child would threaten. Kyle, Karen said slowly, like a parent. Do you want to build a snowman? I don't know why I nodded, except that I felt so very vulnerable and dumb. They were snowmen. They were doing something to snow. It had to be one of them screaming, acting, or something. These weren't scientists, I convinced myself, as I made another ball, but role players. Snowman number 3, or 1172, was completed, restrained, and ready for whatever. However, instead of going back to the kitchen, I lingered in the hall by the dining room door. Happy birthday! A force I didn't comprehend, not volume, brought me to my knees. The air felt full of energy again, and I felt unexpectedly upbeat. I moved closer and cracked the door enough to peek. The snowman on the table wore the hat, and a scarf. He'd been given a face, a button nose and 2 eyes of blackest coal. You have to stop, Karen. I didn't know which of them said it. Karen rolled on her stool, along the edge of the bed, to the snowman's face to reply. You know we can't. Please stop asking, and give us what we want. I saw the pipe fall from the mouth of the snowman. I hadn't given it a mouth. And then the mouth moved. The snowman was moving. It was alive. And his words were profoundly sad. It's been 40 years, Karen. You've gained nothing. And lost yourselves. The child I knew grew up, Karen interjected. Not annoyed, but indifferent. We have learned much. You simply aren't aware. It's only 39 years, actually. What have you learned? The snowman asked. I don't think he was curious. He talked to delay some inevitable, unpleasant ordeal. Karen and the others continued preparations, setting out more tools and removing, of all things, Christmas decorations and holiday-associated food. We've learned you do not come alive in any form but this. The 2-headed version remained lifeless. We couldn't change your gender. or anatomically correct. Conscious vivisection proves you have no internal organs, no nerves, yet feel pain.
The first time we met, he said, I told you I was ticklish, Karen. You and the others here made me out of snow. Just snow. There's nothing else.
But there is, Karen corrected swiftly, before flicking the brim of his hat. This hat does not contain you, your consciousness. That much we know. It does not cause other manufactured homunculi to live. And yet, we have successfully managed to amputate portions of you with other holiday paraphernalia. Fruitcake, coniferous tree branches. The turkey was especially promising. Just as you can be reformed completely with only small portions of your original snow, the turkey-snow hybrid restored to 100%. We'd collectively eaten more than 90%. Do you understand what such a phenomenon could do to stop world hunger?
I don't remember,
the snowman said.
Why?
The turkey experiments? Karen lit a miniature blowtorch. The trauma and physical pain of being consumed by us may have caused you to repress the memory. Obviously, we cannot give you anesthesia or painkillers of any kind, because you have no blood, no heart, no lungs to deliver the medicine throughout your body. Moreover, you are already frozen. Yet, you feel everything. A human being would likely block out much of what you have endured. We don't know if your mind works the same. The pace of her explanation increased as she brought the flame closer. It could be you do not retain memories well. Why you greet us the same each time you're resurrected. Why you don't know you're 1173.
It's Frosty, Karen. Frosty,
he said. Not defiant. Just tired. Ever see a snowman cry? I have. And his tears were warm enough to create a web of rivulets over his round face. She put the flame to his right eye. The coal lit up. Frosty screamed. I couldn't watch. Shamefully, I retreated to the kitchen, took another shot, and got to work on some beers. Inside the freezer, with the door closed, the vocalized torment reduced to the point I could delude myself into believing none of this night was real. A persistent knocking preceded the next appearance of Karen, for another snowman. 1174. Another manifestation of Frosty. I didn't move. What are you doing in there? The screaming. Who are you people? Don't tell me there isn't time, because I'm fucking out if you tell me this is anything but a prank. Her eyes seemed to notice the grip I kept on the chisel in my tool belt. 74 years ago, my colleagues and I found a discarded magician's hat. We built a snowman. And when we placed the hat on his head, he began to dance around. The magician saw it happen and quickly reclaimed the hat. Our experience of the living snowman lasted less than 3 minutes. Yet, a new myth spread from our town. Yes, Bridal Veil Lake. Here. That's where it began. Though few now remember. A song was recorded. They made a cartoon in 1969. Numerous spin-offs after that. Frosty became a tradition for children all over. But to us, my friends and I, he became our obsession. As soon as we came of age, we tracked down the magician, Professor Hinkle, and reclaimed what was ours. Her intentional pause made it clear what they'd done to Hinkle. We all studied science, Karen went on, and soon the experiments began. They're horrible, I said. I won't help you. Kyle, Karen said. Do you want to build a snowman? What? Didn't you hear? The gun slipped into her hand too easily from her lab coat sleeve. Sorry, she said, but time is not on our side. We only have until morning. We don't know why. Then we'll have to wait a whole year. And we haven't got a lot of those left, I'm afraid. I thought of the chisel. I could be pretty fast with it. Never attacked a person before. Karen reacted to my hesitation. I just lit a living snowman's eyes on fire. You don't think I'll kill you? Hard to argue with that. I kept my hands raised until I selected another snow tube. Karen walked behind me as we entered the dining room. None of her fellow psychopaths reacted to the forced escort. My chances, even if I obeyed, weren't great. They were accustomed to violence. Hell, of course they were. Look what they were doing to Frosty. Hinkle was certainly dead by their hands, too. If they had been here since Christmas, then another sculptor had likely objected and been dealt with. Probably yesterday. I had to get out of here. Karen stayed focused on me while I built the next damn snowman. I felt awful doing it. To create something, someone, only so he could suffer immensely, for no good reason, is worse than wrong. There'd be no way to live with it. To sleep again. The hat had been set aside on the tray. The tip of the gun pressed against the back of my head. Don't even think about it. Kyle. She said the fake name mockingly. And try to understand. You're doing something for the greater good of humanity. I placed the currently featureless head on the bed. What did you discover by lighting his eyes on fire? I couldn't stop the tremor in my voice. Karen clicked her tongue against the interior bottom of her mouth before answering. I don't know why. To imitate a clock? I doubled my efforts on the midsection. We hope to learn that they will regenerate like all the rest. I couldn't think of another question. The construction took another 10 minutes. Karen dragged me by the wrist to the periphery of the plastic sheeting on the floor. Easy cleanup when they decided I'd seen too much and needed disposal. She pressed the gun into Oatmeal's hands, still latexed, and advised him to shoot me if I moved.
Gladly,
he said.
I like this one less than the last. Tiffany was nice.
Karen cupped the side of Oatmeal's face. Her touch made him smile warmly. Dear friend, you had a crush on her, didn't you? The old man blushed.
She wore so much perfume. Her voice sounded so sweet. If we ever had children...
He couldn't finish the sentiment. Karen shushed him. I know. We've sacrificed so much.
So much,
Oatmeal concurred. She guided him to my back and assisted in the placement of the gun's tip to the base of my skull. Before she could reach the table, I said her name. Tiffany. Not loud, but not a whisper. His ears would have caught a whisper, too.
What did you say?
The killing part of the weapon lost contact with my skin. He may have attempted to strike me with it. It had to be now. I spun with my chisel. The sharp end knocked a perfect slot across his wrinkly throat, as intended. He dropped the gun and clawed at his neck, panicked, dying. Before Karen or the others understood what had occurred, I retrieved the gun. Hold it, I stuttered. Karen appeared horrified. A gasping shriek escaped her lips because Oatmeal sank to the floor, drowning in his own blood. I will shoot you, I said, entirely uncertain if I would. I'd never even held a gun before. Slowly, I moved around the edge of the plastic sheeting until I could reach the hat. The scientist let out a collective gasp when I picked it up.
You can't,
one said. Another old guy, but with an especially inappropriate Santa beard, given the circumstances.
Karen, he's got the hat.
I'm not sure what he expected her to do about it. The other old guy brought out a shotgun from a nearby box with surprising grace, and time slowed as I stupidly let it happen. Thankfully, the power of the gun threw off his aim. Buckshot buried in the lifeless spherical torso of the inanimate snowman. Karen snapped out of her grief. The hat, you fool! You'll damage the hat! Without thinking, I switched the focus of her gun to the object of her concern. If I destroyed the hat, then their lives, all the terrible things they'd done, really would be for nothing. I backed away to the first set of swinging double doors, a vague idea about escaping in my truck. The scientist tracked my slow steps and followed at a distance, tracking oatmeal spilled blood across the sheeting and the floor. Karen came first, a little faster, a grinchy smile spreading across her face. I didn't understand until the swinging doors swept back into the dining room, and they had vanished like ghouls. Shit. They were up to something, setting up an ambush, working their way toward the kitchen, the exits. Killing the hat would serve no purpose now. They'd come howling, suicidal if I did. Killing a hat? It had already been a long night. The ethical dilemma involved in destroying something that gave life to a single conscious being under very specific circumstances is exceptionally weird. It's the kind of thing a philosopher would dream up. I am no philosopher. I just wanted to go home. I raced back to the kitchen. They would expect me to run for the truck, or find an alternate exit to escape on foot. There are woods all around George Moore, and the tourist strip isn't far. They'd never guess I'd lock myself in the freezer. Once inside, I jammed a frozen fish through the handle as an extra precaution. All the snow I brought awaited. The ice, too. I got to it. My hands shook at first. This was crazy. I'd nearly been shot. Geriatrics were trying to kill me. A few deep breaths later, and his new head was done. With my own blowtorch, a tool of the trade, I hardened his exterior and gave him icicle fangs. The hat itself would sit inside a crown of ice, to avoid easy removal. For his body, I rounded 2 fused sheets of more ice into thick armor. Like the cartoon had illustrated, I formed 2 independent legs and carved more plates to offer further protection. If he was going to save us both, he needed a weapon. And that's about when the frozen fish through the handle shuddered, and I could hear their voices arguing in the kitchen. I didn't know how long I had, so his armaments were crude. A full slab of ice, fused to his left hand as a shield, and a large shard of ice for his right were all I could offer. But for his eyes, nose, and pipe, there were fewer options. Ice cubes infused with charcoal for cocktails resembled his coal eyes as best as I could. The steel button of my jeans, which I severed with the chisel, was all I could offer for a nose. A pipe, if necessary, could be improvised easily with the cordless drill and specialized bit I'd left in the truck. I made do with my ice pick. Anyone could take a few puffs from the thick carrot I hollowed. I placed the hat, and he awoke.
Happy birthday!
The force of him, his voice, his being, pressed me into a shelf. Immediately, he considered his new body, the shield, the spike. Attempts to gain access to the freezer had become a beleaguered tugging on the handle. They might never break the fish, I thought.
Who are you?
He asked. Kyle. I lied. Again. He could move the simple features of his face, the ones that I had made, and they contorted to the incredulous. I want to live. I want to go home. I have a cat, I pleaded. Without ears, he listened to the feeble attempts to breach the freezer. He spat out the carrot, and considered the spike, the shield, and his armor.
It's them,
he said.
They are coming.
I nodded, and apologized for reasons unclear to me. I'm sorry you... Frosty looked to the door as it shuddered.
Are you cold, Karen?
He called out, and the lame assaults ceased for the moment.
Now that's a silly question.
He sounded so serious.
You wouldn't be trying to get in here if you had any warmth left in your heart.
Frosty removed the fish. The door opened, and it all happened so fast. They opened fire. The ice shield held. And when they ran out of ammo, Frosty began. He impaled them efficiently. Karen first, without ceremony or hesitation. I didn't have time to make a sharp edge. He had to stick them. The last tried to run. The snowman, with his legs, proved much faster, gouging the Santa Beard guy between the shoulder blades. Frosty stood in a lake of blood. White snow turned red. I'll never understand why he appeared out of breath.
Come on,
he said. I followed. We left through the loading dock, and the sun had already peaked above the horizon. Through the forest, sending warm splinters of light. Frosty moved across the parking lot towards the trees. I could have gotten the truck and drove away, but I didn't. He sat against a bulge of dirty, plowed snow and looked at me. I hesitated. What the hell were we even doing? My eyes locked with his charcoal-infused ice cubes. He seemed so tired.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Okay, I managed. The early morning sun tore into him. Temperatures swing wildly on the lakes. Frosty earned his freedom at a bad time. Water poured from all over his body. He faced the sun as it crested the treetops. Then, he considered his legs, of all things.
Just like the cartoon,
he said. What?
In the cartoon, I had legs instead of a big ball.
With his spiked hand, he touched his snowy thigh. You know about the cartoon? He considered me over his shoulder.
Yes, that's what I see, where I am, whenever I'm not here, with Karen. The kids.
That's how you know her. Or think you know her. She said you really only met for 3 minutes the first time.
No, I've known her all my life. I think the cartoon got it right. We got them right. Just kids. Not monsters. Not scientists. Just kids. Wondering. Curious. You're all kids, aren't you? Bigger. Older. You know what I know. Nothing at all.
He melted then. Frosty didn't resist. I collected the hat and returned to my truck. Exhausted, I drove home, fed my cat, and fell asleep. The hat on my nightstand. I ignored Mike's calls and effectively quit through neglect. The police didn't come to question me. I never heard or read anything about the vicious murders of a bunch of old people at the George Moore Theater. Somebody must have cleaned up. I started my own business. Storing Christmas snow is easy with a big enough freezer. I bought one. It breaks even. Keeps me fed. I rebuild Frosty every year on Christmas Eve. We get drunk and trade stories. Talk about what happened, and what we'll do next, before he melts on New Year's Day without fail. He can laugh and play just the same as you and me, but he seldom does. He recounts his story of survival, and I listen. I guess that's enough for a snowman. For anyone, really. To understand we're alive, that we hope and dream, and carry the good and the bad in our hearts as we hurl through space. Alone. But only if we stop listening to others. Thumpity thump thump is the call. Answer. Listen. Share. And then maybe, just maybe, this new year will be better than the last. become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.